Hello, I'd like to welcome everybody. My name is DimitriosTriantaphyllou, and I'm the director of the Center for International and European Studies at Kadir University in Istanbul. And welcome to this third Euromed Civil Society webinar that is part of a project funded by the Anna Lindh Foundation on titled Quo Vadis Euromed Civil Society. And it's a project led by the National Foundation for Civil Society Development from Croatia. And partners include the CIES, the European Institute of the Mediterranean, EleonoraInsalaco, that's based in Barcelona and whose director is here today. Fotoessa, the Center for Education, Research and Action, based in Athens, and the House of Europe in Rhodes. And this project, so far, the webinar series include discussions with members of the Anna Lindh family. The first two included discussions with the head of national networks from Greece, Turkey, Germany, Bulgaria, Croatia, Israel, Tunisia, and Lebanon. And we are continuing with this. I will briefly introduce our speakers, who two of them are the heads of network from Spain and the United Kingdom. We have a member of the advisory board, the International Advisory Board of the Anna Lindh Foundation from Jordan, and also someone from the executive staff of the foundation. So the survey, the project includes a number of these webinars, the third one, as I said, being today. We actually have a survey underway at the moment. We will hear some more about the survey results examining the impact of COVID-19 on Euromed civil society organizations and also identifying new emerging environment, the challenges, obstacles, and opportunities. So our speakers today are Professor RowaidaAl-Maaitah. She told me her last name, but I don't know if I'm getting it right. Maaitah. I got it wrong. I'm sorry. Who is a member, as I said, of the Global Advisory Board of the Anna Lindh Foundation, a former Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research of Jordan. She has been in a number of other positions, including Senator of the upper house of the Jordanian parliament, a Minister of State for Government Performance, a Minister of Social Development, Director General of the King Abdullah University Teaching Hospital at Just, Chairperson of the European Education Council, of the Higher Education Council, and a number of other positions. And actually, as a minister, when she was of higher education and scientific research, she was the first woman in the region to have that portfolio, as well as to serve as a president of a university, the Hashamite University of Jordan, chairperson of the Executive Council of Arab Women Organization at the Arab League. And she was also the first woman in Jordan to serve as a vice president for university, the Jordan University of Science and Technology, and director general of the King Abdullah University Teaching Hospital. Very distinguished career. She holds a doctorate degree, a master's and doctorate degree in public health from Tulane University, and had been a postdoc fellow at Louisiana State University, and also has attended senior executive leadership courses at Harvard Kennedy School. Our second speaker is Alison Certis, who is a creative producer, consultant, trainer, social entrepreneur, as well as the head of the National Anna Lindh Foundation Network from the United Kingdom. She has worked across film, theater, and music, as well as a number of charities and the third sector. And here she's also a representative in Place of War, which is a UK-based civil society organization. She has been the co-founder of the Manchester Digital Music Archive, co-founder and fund manager at Futures Venture Foundation, freelancer at Back to Union, and a number of other, board member of Ortsol Community Arts and Fuse Arts Space, Bradford. And it's interesting, if you think of the two backgrounds of the two previous speakers, this is exactly what the Anna Lindh Foundation is, bringing together NGOs from across the Euromed region with people with different backgrounds. Then we have JosepFerré, who is the Director General of EleonoraInsalaco, the European Institute of the Mediterranean, since 2017, as well as a Managing Director of EleonoraInsalaco since 2007. And he has more than 20 years experience in conceptualizing and leading policy-oriented research programs, and an extensive background in cooperation development programs. And he has coordinated a number of numerous publications related to the main issues of the Euro-Mediterranean agenda. Prior to joining EleonoraInsalaco, he was a Director General of the Spanish branch of the African Medical and Research Foundation and Executive Secretary of the Azahar program of the Spanish Agency for International Development Cooperation, promoting sustainable development in the Mediterranean. He has worked as head of mission of the Spanish International Cooperation in Mauritania and program coordinator at the Technical Cooperation Office at the Spanish Embassy in Morocco. And he is actually by training an agronomical engineer. And then our last speaker is EleonoraInsalaco, who is the head of operations and intercultural research at the Anna Lindh Foundation. She's the editor of 3 consecutive editions of the Anna Lindh Report on Intercultural Trends in the Euromed region, and of the Anna Lindh Handbook on Intercultural Citizenship Education in the Euromed region, a graduate of the College of Europe with academic expertise in Islamic studies and Euromed relations in the fields of education, research, youth, civil society, culture and media. So very distinguished panels and very knowledgeable about the state of civil society. But before we get into a discussion of what is the state of play in terms of civil society in the Euromed region, we would like to have Eleonora talk to us a little bit about Dr. Nabil Al-Sharif, Anna Lindh Foundation's executive director, who recently passed a victim himself of the pandemic of COVID-19. And actually the Anna Lindh Foundation has suffered from that. He's not the only officer from the foundation to have lost his life to COVID-19. So we've asked Eleonora to say a few words in his honor. And after she talks to us about Dr. Al-Sharif, we'll hold a minute of silence before we proceed with our webinar. Eleonora, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dimitrios. Good afternoon to everybody, panelists, and all the people that are listening today. So, as Dimitrios was saying, I would like to share some thoughts about Dr. Al-Sharif. Last Thursday, I gave a lecture to master students in public diplomacy. And when explaining the meaning of intercultural dialogue and the mission of the foundation, I decided to speak of Dr. Nabil Al-Sharif, the man that we had the honor to have as executive director of the Anna Lindh Foundation from September 2018 to the 6th of March 2021, when he suddenly and tragically passed away. Dr. Al-Sharif was a great person, a journalist, a diplomat, a decision maker, but I believe we will always remember him as a man of dialogue. In this regard, I refer first of all to the positive attitude of Dr. Al-Sharif that would always put his interlocutor at ease. The smile always on his face was an open door to allow any person in front of him to feel comfortable to speak. He was a good listener, searching in different ways to understand the motives and the needs of the people who would approach him, using silence when needed and appropriate questions to let the person in front of him speak freely. He tried to reach balanced decisions by weighing up options and needs and the interest of all parties involved. He believed in change and was ready to adapt to changing circumstances, as we saw in 2020, when in March all changed for the foundation, for the world, for ourselves in our personal lives with the outburst of COVID-19. He was always ready to accept new proposals and to test new approaches needed in a situation without precedent. He believed in the power of communication and showed us by his example the importance of not leaving any request unanswered, and also to be proactive in the use of communication tools. He was a master in the use of social media. I remember I gave as a target to my colleague working on the Twitter account on intercultural trends to have at least as many followers as the ones that Dr. Al-Sharif had on his Twitter account. He would daily communicate and send out positive messages on his account. In relation to the mandate of Dr. Al-Sharif as Executive Director of the Anna Lindh Foundation, I would like to remember together with you some of the achievements of the organization in this period that especially benefited from his outlook and approach, which was one ensuring both the colleagues within the organization, stakeholders and beneficiaries of the Anna Lindh Foundation would be empowered and provided with the space and tools to grow and participate. This is the case, first of all, with young people. Young women and men across the Euromed region that Dr. Al-Sharif truly believed are the present and future for the promotion of intercultural dialogue and the sustainability of our communities. He fully supported the Young Mediterranean Voices and the Erasmus Plus virtual exchange programs that allowed in the last 2 years to engage thousands of young people in dialogues among themselves to identify issues of common concerns north and south of the Mediterranean, but also to make their voice, ideas, recommendations heard and known to the decision makers. He was a strong believer in the mission and the Anna Lindh Foundation Civil Society Network as the main asset of the Anna Lindh Foundation. And during his mandate, he was always in contact, first of all, with the heads of network, the coordinators of our national networks, to understand their views and needs, to better support their work, to try to identify ways that could facilitate their work. And he launched more than one funding scheme to allow coordinators and hundreds of members of the ALF network to professionally do their job for dialogue. Dr. Al-Sharif considered also central investing and working with researchers, students, educators, journalists. I remember when we discussed the first results that came out of the public opinion polling in 2020, that he considered of utmost importance sharing these results with the academic community, with journalists, with the civil society, with our partners and the media, so that to show that a majority of people in the Euromed region is embracing and believes in the importance of promoting cultural diversity. In 2019, we held in Amman the Euromed Women for Dialogue Forum under the patronage of Her Royal Highness Princess Rim, an endeavor around which the director worked so much on, with the idea that we could contribute to gender equality by presenting role models, by presenting experiences of dialogue led by women that could inspire other people and other women. He believed that the presentation of a multitude of experiences by women was the best immunity to prevailing stereotypes in our societies. Dr. Al-Sharif also requested that the information sharing was always ensured with our board of governors, our networks, our advisory council, because the sharing of information he considered is at the heart of any collaboration and mutual support. He also ensured an ongoing dialogue with the European Commission as main donor of the Anna Lindh Foundation, but also partner in the implementation of our mandate. Dr. Al-Sharif wanted and believed in working through partnerships and to keep dialogue always open with other committed organizations to the Anna Lindh Foundation mandate. Under his leadership, we signed the first Memorandum of Understanding with UNESCO. We had the constant exchanges and coordination with the Union for the Mediterranean, with the OCDE, with the UN Alliance of Civilizations, with the UNFPA, the North-South Center of the Council of Europe, the British Council, UNIMED, Friends of Europe, MEDAC, Search for Common Ground, COPEAM, to mention only a few of the institutions that we were having regular exchanges and collaborations with. And what is important to say is that for our director, partnership work had to be translated into initiatives. Partnership work meant to do projects together. So a man of dialogue, but also a man of action. I would like to conclude with the orientations that Dr. Al-Sharif gave me when we discussed together my participation to this panel. First of all, he considered of utmost importance the relevance of the topic we are discussing today. So the role of civil society 25 years after the launch of the Barcelona process. And also he asked me to share information on the main initiatives that we are developing in this period and since the outburst of COVID-19, with a specific reference to the Anna Lindh Foundation Virtual Marathon for Dialogue, our online course, our work on education, as he believed that giving visibility to dialogue work was as important as doing activities, as we always needed to remember that he was also a man of communication. So I would like to express on behalf of the colleagues of this panel and the ALF community a big, big thank you to Dr. Al-Sharif, who will always remain in our hearts and who will always remain a guidance. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you very much, Eleonora, for a very, very touching tribute. And I suggest that even virtually, we take a moment of silence in Dr. Al-Sharif's honor. Thank you. Thank you. Let's continue with our webinar. All right. So basically, the webinar is about the state of civil society 25 years after the Barcelona Declaration, where apart from the 25 years plus that have ensued since that November 25 years ago, we've talked about COVID-19 and its impact on civil society. And I've asked the speakers to talk about this, also some of the priority themes that need to be tackled. And also how, because, you know, one of the things that's also happened is that we are in the midst of systemic change again, the way we were 25, 30 years ago with the end of the Cold War. And we can see this, especially in the Mediterranean region, where there's an increased militarization, for example. It's evident. And what is the impact, therefore, on civil society and the work that the foundation is trying to do and everyone on this panel is trying to do? And since this is the third session on this topic, I was also looking through my notes of some of the themes that have come up with the previous two sessions. Actually, a lot of them have been sort of repeated, but by speakers, not aware that the others have raised them. One is about, you know, the need to, how to organize connectivity across time and space. Is something that has come up repeatedly. Social entrepreneurship, which is something that's come in a lot, and especially how you combine social entrepreneurship, link it to the CSO sector, is something that's also been discussed repeatedly. The role of women, Eleonora, you raised it, and you said it's one of the priorities. Also, the foundation is something that's come up. One of the previous speakers had talked about the need for some sort of code of conduct for CSOs across the region. In that, and this is also linked to social entrepreneurship, in that CSOs need maybe to acquire some of the tools of businesses in terms of sending the messages out, not to become businesses themselves, right? But more professional in that sense. And therefore, a code of conduct might be something to consider. And of course, with the COVID era, new issues have come up. The issue of sustainability of CSOs, the issue of funding, the issues of digitalization, where a lot of them have been forced, we have been forced to do our work on like this, online, but it's not necessarily easy for a lot of the CSOs, right? I remember the national director from Lebanon, who, when we did this webinar with her 2 months ago, was talking to us about, in particular, Lebanon and Beirut, and, you know, with the bomb, with the explosion, where CSOs took over the role of the state in many of the functions. They cannot work online digitally. So how do you sustain, can they be sustained and adapt to the new realities? So with this in mind, I'll give the floor to our speakers, and we'll start with Professor Al-Maaitah, sorry, with her brief intervention, and we'll proceed with the others. I apologize again. I don't know why your name keeps giving me trouble today.
It's okay, Dimitrios. It's a little bit hard. So first, thank you so much for inviting me for this important webinar and panel. And thank you so much, Eleonora, for your nice words. We will never forget His Excellency, Dr. Sharif. I would like to touch, of course, first on, like you said, on the civil society and COVID-19. We all know that, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused a huge public health and social crisis while hitting badly on societies and economies. This is very true. However, the pandemic has shone a light not only on the great efforts and commitment by healthcare providers, but also on the great efforts by the civil society organizations and their dedication actually to protect the public in their relentless fight against COVID-19. So actually they are, side by side with all healthcare providers, people, governments, NGOs, and others. Of course, with many crucial sectors that have suffered from the COVID-19 pandemic because of mobility restrictions, social distancing measures, and other confinement measures imposed for the public and reasons, many CSOs have played a critical role at the national level, as well as, of course, in the national response to COVID-19, as they provide the frontline help for the public, as well as they help the fragile actually and underprivileged population. And I think that was excellent, work and social action. They are like in Jordan, they've done actually excellent job. In Jordan, actually, I just want to give you one example. We have now more than 200 epidemiological investigation teams, and each team is more than 20 people. They are all deployed all over the kingdom. They are all volunteers from CSOs, private sector, individuals, students, physicians, and others. Also, the CSOs, as well as the private sector, the NGOs, they provided very good donations also for the government, donations that include funds, medicine, disinfection products, and of course, some other. So this is, I think, a very healthy social movement in a very tough time. The thing that you just said, Dimitrios, that, one of the things that has actually came out from this is the digitalization. And also I would like to emphasize on this issue. I don't know if you said that they mentioned that. I don't know how much they mentioned about it. Because the digitalization and the transformation in technology that, happened, this will not stop. We have to be sure that this will not stop after COVID-19 when the pandemic is over. In the post-COVID-19 recovery phase, digital tools will be one of the top priorities, I think, for the CSOs, and we have to be well prepared for it. But we cannot do it actually fully effective if we don't prepare people of the know-how. We are not talking about very simple social media. We are talking about very challenging. We were talking about the cybersecurity also with the digitalization and some other. We're talking about some other important models and tools that we have to learn. Like I said, social media alone will not be enough in the future for effective engagement with the society and the government. Communication, teaching, and training modalities will be changed, so we have to be prepared for it, and we have to prepare the CSOs for it. Therefore, digital literacy and training programs are very essential actually to CSOs, not only on technical aspects of as communication and strategic planning, but also on different digital tools. The question now is how much they are prepared now, the CSO, how much they are prepared to make smooth and a quick shift to online technologies. Do they have the right capacity? Of course, we need to explore that. Maybe this is one of the investigations area that we have to follow. Also, we have to ask how the CSOs, youth women, will take advantage also of this opportunity. This is an opportunity that we have to take advantage, and which is actually brought by the digitalization because of the COVID-19. Of course, capacity building, it means that it's very important and highly needed to enhance a new team and project management skills also for online work, as well as techniques and methods for effective building of online relationship. We're talking about online relationship, not one way. It is online relationships with the audience and online communication skills with the institutions and the wide public. Of course, we need to give special attention to CSOs, workers, and marginalized civil society groups. And you just talked actually about it also, Dimitrios. Of course, we need to focus on promoting future youth engagement. And here where we have actually the entrepreneurs, they're very good actually in technology. They can help a lot, you know, the CSOs actually in this area. I think, you know, youth also, they have been actually working very hard during the COVID-19. And I'm sure that, you know, they're working, you know, helping their own communities in the different world and not, you know, in specific countries. Because I sit in one of the committee for our regional committee for COVID-19, WHO. We always talk about, you know, how many students, how many, you know, youth they go and support the elderly, women and others. Especially now, you know, we have, as you might know, you know, for, you know, gender issues, we have more prevalence of violence against women in many communities. So this is one area. And also more mental health problems and more elderlies that even, you know, they cannot get their own bread and their own food. Also, there's also, you know, the danger of also, you know, the food, you know, actually, there's insecurity also in the food. So I think, you know, this is one important issue for CSOs, and I'm sure, you know, that they will be very efficient in this area. And so like you said, again, we need to re-emphasize the importance and ensuring better connectivity, communication, engagement, and strategic partnerships, as well as priority setting. And I'm talking about not only partnership, but strategic partnerships. And also we need to put our priorities after the COVID-19. We also need to remember actually that there are many sectors that have suffered from the COVID-19. We're talking about business, we're talking about education, we're talking about health. We are also talking about, you know, relationship with people and even, you know, same family. One concern actually in this area is enhancing, you know, the government, CSOs and public to realize, you know, the issue of equity. You know, among all these, the issue of equity, we have to put it at the heart of any intervention and policy action. This is very important, especially now, I think, with more poverty in the world, with more distancing, you know, of people from the world also. Equity is very important, and it's equity, I'm talking equity in resources, in sharing decision-making, in planning, and this is, you know, very important for the CSOs. This is their time to ask, you know, that they have to be also at the head of the table, at the head of the table, because they are now working, you know, so hard, you know, for their communities. This requires also that bold decisions and policies should be in a place to make sure that the CSO's capacities are maintained and strengthened in the post-COVID-19 recovery phase. And here, actually, we need also to change, you know, the rules of the game. I think we need more CSOs at the leadership level. I know that we have good leadership, but still, you know, we need more. We need more, you know, we said that, you know, we should advocate for, you know, right policies, but now we should say that we should influence actually policies. So they have to be influential, they have to be at the seat of the table, So they have to sit, at the tables. So the main challenge and issue for civil society, they should be treated now after COVID-19 and with all the things that they're doing as actors, partners, and not as beneficiaries. And I think this is the success of the CSOs, I think, if they start, working for that. And I'm not talking about any partners. They are true partners, efficient partners. They are not beneficiaries. This also leads me actually to another point, which is the investment in people in civil society. We need to realize, and the governance need to realize. Why I'm talking about, governance, because I know that, we will mention that, but, the CSOs actually, they are different from one country to another country, especially, in some areas where they have political instability or no democratization. I think, things, are different. So investing in people in the civil society is very important. We need to emphasize that the people that we have working for their communities, they are an investment rather than cost. And I think this is the message actually. It's investment, not cost in the government. We cannot build such investment without strong leadership and influence from the CSOs, youth, women, and others. The fact that the CSS, they need to make now a solid shift actually, like I said, to a culture of leadership. The other area that I would like to emphasize that we need also to enhance the policy dialogue with everyone, like we said, sharing, the same table. We talked actually about it a lot of time. We're talking about, of course, marginalized group also, which is very important. I think policy dialogue is badly needed to create a collective agenda. We need to have, after COVID-19, a collective agenda. And I think, with the surveys and with all the webinars that you are talking, I'm sure that you will come up with the collective agenda for intercultural dialogue, and not only intercultural dialogue, but also for intergenerational dialogue. This is to renew actually what we have to learn from the COVID-19. I'm not talking about to learn about, the successes, but also about, the worst, the lessons learned, that we have in order to bring them together, in order to create a sense of ownership and strategic partnership at all levels. Also, this is true, and I would like to say that I learned that from my sister, that this will come true when we all sit and fit at the policy table. Then we can talk about, yes, we invest in our people, they are not cost, and then, we can have better strategic relationship. Actually, when we sit but not fit in the absence of civil society, youth, and other essential actors, we will not fit. Advocacy is important, but influence is more important. It is more powerful and influential when we have collective power and collective action, actually. Regarding centers of excellence, Eleonora with us now, and she knows that we emphasize that many times. When we talk about centers of excellence, we are talking about actually bringing on those with, same goals, shared goals coming together. But again, we're not talking about, the giant CSOs or, the large CSOs. We're talking about, bringing them with the medium as well as, the small ones, because they have all, to grow together. And we're not talking about one country or one region. We're talking about people from south, north, and, from poor, from rich, so I think this is important, I think, to work hard for this area. I don't know what you will get from the survey and from the different webinars, but I think it's very important to do the mapping and the innovative work actually of the CSOs and youth during the COVID-19. From there, we know how are people working under stress. If they do that under stress, they will be, excellent, I'm sure, after that. Also, I just said, like, we need, large scale intercultural project. We can also having the CSOs with the government as well as, other, Eleonora just talked about the UNFPA, the World Bank and others. We can, connect with them. We also need to increase actually the number of small CSOs. And this is, I think, again, very important. We need to strengthen and invest in the overall capacity of the CSOs to act effectively and contribute to the achievement of the SDGs. We know that we all work toward that. We should not forget the SDGs. It should be actually in the heart of what we're doing. And actually, after that, we know that the establishment of a very solid monitoring and evaluation system with the strategic indicators and measurements to ensure the sustainability, quality, and impact of the CSOs programs and lead initiatives on stronger community for stronger communities. Actually, I also learned from my different meetings that when you ask the CSOs and others, instead of what matters with you, we have to ask what matters to you. So we have also to change our way of communication in order to show the positive way of doing things. So I think I think these are my main things, and I have just a few things about the research priorities. Just a quick. I think we have to document everything. We have to document our strengths and weaknesses. We have to come up with a body of knowledge and a body of evidence in order to support the CSOs. They have, of course, to help in that. We need to map, for their expertise and excellence. We need also to do mapping for new and adapted, services and initiatives that carried out by the CSOs, innovative also digital tools that they are using now actually, and how the CSOs will take advantage actually in the future of the opportunity brought by digitalization about, more societal cohesion and others in the area of education. Now they have actually big space, in education, in business, and in economy and others. Also, we need also to identify the contribution of CSOs in helping to cope with the consequences of the pandemic. They have a great role over there. After that, how we will heal the world after pandemic. They have excellent, I think, role in this area. We need also to understand the main challenges faced by the CSOs and their members. I'm talking about not institutions, as a whole, but, the members as well as users. And this is, I think, very important, talking about the positive and negative, actually, experiences. The other thing also, we need to identify the priorities toward reinforcing the CSO's resilience. Also, we need a mechanism for cooperation and collaboration between governments in order, to establish structured and transparent mechanism for cooperation. And also, the most important thing is to identify priorities for capacity building and training needs to strengthen the CSO's digital capacities in the post-19 recovery. These are actually the main points for me now that I can share with you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rowaida. You provided a very comprehensive. Your contribution was very comprehensive, and yet I think you covered so much ground. I mean, basically, what you are saying is that we are entering, and we know it, a hybrid world, and so digitization is important. Digital literacy, as you say, that's very, very much relevant. But also the issue of equity is something you stressed, and how this is an opportunity for CSOs, but also for political forces to understand that CSOs need to be at the table. And I like the way you put it. It's not, advocacy is important, but you said, but influence is more important. You can only do that by being at the table. And it's also your approach about, the collective agenda, not only in terms of intercultural dialogue, but intergenerational dialogue, which is absolutely true, because how do you get the youth invested? I know from, if you look at numbers from youth involvement in some of the countries of the north, my country, Greece, Italy, Turkey, some of the other Balkan, very low involvement of youth in volunteer organizations and CSOs. How do you get them involved is something, and I'm sure it's the same across the board. So that's important too. So you raised a number of issues. Let's move on to, and there are many more things I can say, but let's move on to our next speaker, Alison, to hear what she has to say about this topic. Alison, floor is yours.
Thank you. How do I follow that? Because you pretty much hit every comment that I wanted to make. But I suppose for me, the most important thing is to reflect on the experience here in the UK. Some of that is relevant globally, not just across the Euromed region. And when we think about the 25 years since the signing of the Barcelona Agreement, a particular low point, I think, for all of us was the 2008 financial crisis. And because of that crisis, apologies for the noise in the background, we were all plunged into austerity. And here in the UK, we've been living with austerity since 2008. And it felt like we lurched from that to our next major crisis of Brexit in 2016. And at a point where we wanted to talk about connecting more across with our friends in Europe and making sure that collaboration was more appropriate and allowable and exchange could be done, we actually found ourselves in a position where we were facing the real prospect of losing all of that wonderful connectivity and opportunity and access. So within the UK, we'd already started to become introverted rather than looking outward and across the world. And then we roll through this process, and it becomes more and more apparent, even within our own internal mechanisms, that things are not quite as they should be. And where it really tends to hit the most are those marginalised communities. We saw the horrific reactions to the mass refugee exodus that impacted everybody across the EU. But those were signs and symptoms of deeper issues going on. And definitely for me, I feel that chasm that has grown between those that have and those that don't. And where do those that don't find their voice? This is where civil society plays its most active role, because they are generally the ones that provide the voice for the most marginalised. They are the institutions, whether they're small, very local, hyper-local entities, or larger national and sometimes international entities. They are trying to provide the voice for those that do not have a voice. And I think we've kind of, within the UK, we very much saw a direct split, literally 50-50 over Brexit, and the continuing infighting and sour feeling. And it felt like actually we had this huge wound within our nation that didn't feel like it would ever come together again. You know, there was literally within families opposition, from partners opposition. It felt like you knew what people thought, and then all of a sudden you didn't know what people thought. And then we had the pandemic. In amongst all of that, the absolute trauma here in the UK of feeling we were very much behind instead of in front, of not learning from the case of what happened in Italy. And actually, one of the proud things, I think, for us, not only is the NHS and the healthcare provision that we were able to access, and that was free at point of access for everybody, but where the slack was picked up most was with our CSOs and NGOs. In fact, I think society would have collapsed a lot sooner had we not had those wonderful, marvelous organisations coming out. And what has been even greater than that is this real sense of collectivism again, where people started to pull together a little bit more, where they'd pushed apart after the Brexit scenario. And what was wonderful equally was the fact that the individual in that, even outside of entities and CSO organisations, that people were coming together in a voluntary context at a hyper-local level to provide absolutely crucial, important work. You talked about poverty and food. In the UK, which is, you know, one of the richest supposed economies in a global world, we had a 110% increase in the use of food banks over the last 12 months. Food banks, which have been in operation since we started with austerity in 2008. And we have to ask ourselves, why is this the case? Where has the focus gone? Surely we should be about humanity and supporting everybody. And that everybody, given the right conditions, can flourish. These are the areas that CSOs focus on the most and why they have such huge social capital and social value. And I think often that is lost when we look at quite often the private sector and the focus of business. So I think that Rowaida is absolutely right. They should have a table. We all need a seat at the table. We should have a direct line to governments, because this is the only way that you'll see any real solid change. Unless you have the ear of government, you won't see the change that you need to see operate so that you have a fairer and more equitable society. Again, another word there that I'm using from my colleague. And I think equity plays a large role in what CSOs are trying to address and redress. They're trying to make those equitable opportunities for everybody, and often the most marginalised. So for me, I think some of the key themes, one of the challenges that the pandemic brought around is definitely technology. We are all thankful for having Zoom, but for those who were unfortunate to be furloughed or at home or losing their jobs, and which the vast majority of people losing their jobs during this pandemic were women. They were also the majority who were furloughed. Again, that's, you know, a massive issue and a problem. The sector that I represent and come from was also massively impacted. Arts, culture, heritage, they are, you know, what make us as human beings. They were how we find our connections, and they were decimated during this period. And I think it's important that we understand that technology is only one aspect. We still also have a big division in access to technology, even here in the UK. Not everybody has access to the internet. Not everybody has multiple tools for which they can use to access the internet. And never was that more apparent than those people that were trying to homeschool. If you had more than one child and you were trying to work from home, and you only have one laptop, because let's face it, how many homes have got multiple laptops or multiple devices, then that becomes hugely problematic. And again, we see that it's those who have the least, who are the most marginalised, who are the most impacted. And again, this is where CSOs stepped in, and where we started to see lots of rise in those lovely voluntary organisations, that voluntary and community sector coming together to address those challenges. They were the ones out on the streets, taking the food supplies literally to the NHS workers that couldn't afford and couldn't get the time to go to the food banks. NHS workers going to food banks. And I'm not just talking about during the pandemic. Everything was just emphasised because of the pandemic. So CSOs play a major role in trying to change the way we view society and what becomes fair. And I think another point that was raised earlier, and I'm really glad that it was around the mental health and wellbeing agenda. We will face, and we have been facing, a huge upsurge in a cry for help from so many people. I spent the last 12 months providing mental health support across my sector. I'm thankful for that because I maintained myself doing that. But I recognise that we have a huge issue and it will not be going away. It will only increase and will become more problematic, and it needs to be dealt with. Along with the physical impacts of COVID, we have to look at what we are going to do around the mental health impacts. And again, the expectation will be the CSO and the NGOs will just slot in. Because where government doesn't provide anything, the private sector is not going to do it, not unless it is paid to do it. And quite often they're paid way above and over what they actually need to provide a service. So if the expectation is always that the slack will be picked up by NGOs and CSOs, then it's only fair and equitable that those entities and organisations have a seat at the table to decide what should be done and how they can access the resource, the support and the capacity to continue to be able to do that on a humanitarian level. Ultimately, we connect as human beings. We need to stay connected. We need to keep supporting those who are the furthest from that mainstream opportunity, those who are most marginalised, because those are the people who are going to be the most impacted. And it is generally always the CSOs and NGOs you will find operating in those spaces. So as a closing remark for me, I think the key areas in terms of policy, well, policy will only change if the seats at the table are given to those entities that can make that change and can give the voice to the voiceless. And unless we get that bit right, it doesn't matter what we think our major policy areas should be. The voice is missing from the table to make that policy change. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for a very somber presentation, Alison. I mean, it's interesting because you've raised a number of issues. First of all, you reminded us, without actually saying it, that the Syrian civil war has entered into a second decade. 10 years, this is where we are. We entered the second decade of Syria, and some of the repercussions of that are being felt everywhere, right? From countries like mine that are closer to your country as well, and that's marginalized voices. And also, interestingly enough, something we tend to forget, because I talked about systemic change at the beginning, which was between countries, but we are talking about changes within countries, right? The impact of the economic and financial crisis, Brexit, pandemic, and so on, at least in your country. In my country, it's different. In other countries, it's different. And how all of that is having an impact, how governments can and cannot necessarily cope, how they expect others to fill in the slack, CSOs and NGOs, for things they should be doing, they should be providing for as well. And therefore, the issue of equity does come in, because there's real societal change at play. And in the post-pandemic world, there's real fear, because one of the consequences of what's been happening is populism and so many other things happening all across the North in particular as well. And therefore, if we don't address issues of equity, just like Rowaida said before you, there is a real issue, there's a real danger that things could turn out for the worse. And therefore, a place at the table is necessary. So we have this message from the two of you. Let's move on now to JosepFerré to hear his perspective. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dimitrios. Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you to invite me, and thanks to the Croatian and the Greek head of networks for organizing this series of webinars. I fully endorse the statement made by Eleonora. Thank you very much indeed. Dr. Nabil, was a very good person, a very good professional, and above all a very good friend. I do think that the best way to honor the legacy of Dr. Nabil El-Sharif is to work even harder in his vision of the Anna Lindh Foundation, its values and principles. From the European Institute of the Mediterranean, our contribution for more than 30 years now is to promote as much as possible all kinds of collaborations, cooperations, or partnerships between the two shores of the Mediterranean, both at the institutional and civil society levels. In 1995, we organized the first civil society forum in the margins of the ministerial meeting that launched the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership, the so-called Barcelona process. At that time, we gathered more than 1,000 participants from the whole region. And 20 years ago, it was quite a novelty, was quite a revolution. And many people say to the people who were organizing that, because I was not there at that moment, that there was not civil society as such in southern and eastern Mediterranean countries. And we proved with this first civil society and the later on that have been organized that they were wrong. And for the first time, 20 years ago, in the region, a public policy paid attention to give some room to the participation of civil society representatives. Nowadays, the participatory mechanisms and somehow engagement of the civil society in the policy-making process at the European, national, region, or even a local level is not unusual in both shores. Indeed, there is a lot of room to improve. We all know that. But there is a big change if we take into account our common baseline, our common origin in this perspective. As a part of the IEMed work on providing evidence-based research, policy-oriented, useful to action, we conduct every year a Euromed survey of experts and actors of the whole region, assessing a specific policy or a specific context in the region. The last issue, where we gather around 800 participants with a very good balance between North and South, gender balance, and also different kind of profiles from the 43 UFM countries, was devoted to civil society and social movements. And this is the publication, and all the results of this publication is available on online free of charge in our website. However, I would like to share with you some of the main meaningful results. First of all, the first thing that I would like to highlight is that 90% of the responders consider that the civil society is playing an outstanding role in our countries. The responders, both from North and South, consider the most important mission of the civil society is to monitor policies and to be watchdog of citizens' rights, for instance. When we ask on where the civil society is facing the biggest obstacles, a part of the countries which military conflicts that have been raised, on the top of our responders, they highlight 4 countries, 2 member states of the European Union and 2 countries from the South and the East. That proves that when it comes to the civil society affairs, the issues are common in the whole region. It's not a question of South, or it's not a question of North. Another result that it seems to me very meaningful is that when we ask for the European Union added value compared to other global players in the region, along the years, because we are conducting this exercise in different years, the promotion of good governance, democracy, rule of law, and human rights are always on the top position of the added value of the European Union. And if we take into account only the Southern and Eastern respondents, this willing or this perception of the added value of the European Union in this regard is even more. As Dimitrios already said, we are on the process of conducting a specific consultation in the framework of this same project, Quo Vadis, mainly among Anna Lindh members. And I take advantage to encourage all the attendees to participate in this consultation. Is only 7 questions, very simple questions. This question is not already finished. We will finish the fieldwork in 2 weeks. And I would like to share with you some of the preliminary partial results. In general terms, we can say that so far, the respondents consider that in the last 25 years, some improvement have been take place in the region, in terms of gender equality, intercultural dialogue, or recognition of diversity. On the other hand, there are other aspects that have evolved rather negatively. For instance, youth employment, media freedom, or countering extremism and radicalization in both shores of the Mediterranean, in the European Union and also in the Southern and Eastern Mediterranean countries. In any case, we all have to invest ourselves in all these fields and much more as civil society representatives. When we talk about what we need to reach our goals as civil society organizations, many aspects arise at operational level. One of the first is the lack of funding, as already said by our colleagues. But fundraising is very much related to competencies in that specific and particular domain. But not all the grassroots level organizations have to have strong capacities in that field. This is the reason why, from my point of view, it's so important to develop sub-granting schemes in a network as the Anna Lindh Foundation, for instance, with adapted procedures and flexible mechanisms. This is, I think, something, because the level of the different representative of civil society, the CSOs, are very much different. So we have to find the way that everybody, or that specific profile of CSOs, has the capacity to reach these funds. Another aspect for me, very crucial, is everything related to the implementation of the evaluation systems, which to me are very much linked to lessons learned, not only from success cases or success stories, but above all from the mistakes that we made. And because when we have a mistake, when something goes wrong, we learn much more than when one thing goes smoothly, for sure. And this is vital to improve. It's vital to improve our self capacities and to achieve better results. Another aspect in operational terms is already mentioned, is the question of enhancing capacities. More than building capacities, because In the Anna Lindh Foundation, for instance, there are plenty of expertise, professionalism, and talent. But there is always room to acquire new skills, to adopt innovative approaches and methodologies. And we have, as representatives of civil society, to be ready to get all this information and these new methodologies and practices. Finally, another aspect that is needed in the world of the CSOs to reach our common goals is obviously the networking. But networking on what purpose? Indeed, the networking, it helps us a lot in order to learn from our common experiences. This is, I think, a very important point. To build synergies among us in our countries, in our own countries. As has been said, the question of the intercultural dialogue is not anymore a question of dialogue between countries. It's a question of a dialogue inside our societies. And indeed, we can create synergies in our countries, and we can also create synergies at EleonoraInsalaco scale, as we are doing in this Quo Vadis project, for instance. Another crucial aspect, operational, and to outreach and to make visible what is done at local level. What Alison said, for instance, to raise the voices that are fighting on the ground day by day. This is very important also. And another aspect that is for me important is to get critical mass to influence. As Rowaida said, we have to influence for, in this case, intercultural dialogue, and to have solid and long-lasting results. All in all, civil society organizations are crucial for the progress of our societies, and with the social-economic effects of the pandemic, our role is even more important. And in that respect, in this regard, as has been already said, the marginalized civil society groups, the vulnerable layers of our society, they are suffering. These are the layers that are suffering the most on this pandemic era. And for us at the IEMed, intercultural dialogue is very much related, very much to do to the question of inclusion. And inclusion is very much related to fight against inequalities and to provide equal opportunities, no matter your religion, no matter the color of your face, your sexual orientation, or your political thoughts. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for your comments. I mean, I noted. I mean, it's true. EleonoraInsalaco has wide experience with its surveys that it does, and especially relevant is the last big survey, that civil society and social movements. And it's very interesting first sort of findings from the survey within the framework of this project. And it was also of note, I mean, I did not remember this, but in 1995, the first big civil society forum, right? 1,000 people. At the time when civil society was not necessarily something that, you know, is either in fashion or as developed as it is today. So 1,000 participants in Barcelona in parallel with the summit and the Barcelona process. Before I give the floor to Eleonora, I would like to say to anybody who has comments, questions, to please put them up and on Zoom in the chat function, and also on Facebook. And by the way, Eleonora, on Facebook, members of Dr. Al-Sharif's family are thanking you for your lovely tribute. Two very nice and touching comments on the CIES page. So Eleonora, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dimitrios. And I can only smile. I'm very happy that we are in touch with also the family of Dr. Al-Sharif. So thank you for sharing this information. And thank you again for having organized this panel discussion, because as I said before, it is, I believe, very important to talk about the civil society work 25 years after the launch of the Barcelona process and 15 years after the creation of the Anna Lindh Foundation. Speaking about the civil society work and also intercultural dialogue in 2021 is, of course, in some ways different from speaking about it when we were created as the Anna Lindh Foundation, but we believe that we have a similar mandate, that we needed to focus on similar objectives and address similar needs, even if we are speaking about a different context and some new emerging trends. 2021 is key year for the Anna Lindh Foundation, as we are transitioning to our next programming phase. So the programs we will be developing these years, they have a potential for sustainability until the next during the next programming cycle, and we are all experiencing this new way of working and doing international cooperation. So exchanging such as the one of this afternoon allow really to really think deeply on where we need to, on what we need to focus. Since last March, the coronavirus pandemic has exposed all of us and human beings to our vulnerability in a very harsh way, but it has also helped us to feel all connected and interconnected, that it is among let's say the main missions we have at the Anna Lindh Foundation. At the beginning of the pandemic, emergency measures they were taken, but a year later we understand that we are not talking anymore about a transition period, but really of measures that needed to be long-term, and a new way of thinking and also of rethinking intercultural dialogue is imposing it on all of us working for this mission. And of course, the civil society organizations are for us the main agents, the direct interlocutors with people, and they should be given, as all the panelists really rightly said, they should be given the right space at the decision-making level, because they have a huge role also to keep our societies together. So what we see from the foundation and through our stakeholder analysis and the research work is that somehow our mission is very relevant. Our mission, I don't mean the secretariat, I mean our mission as Anna Lindh Foundation altogether is very relevant, because xenophobia, racial profiling, discrimination are just becoming even more visible. The multiplication of fake news, hate speech. These are challenges for which, of course, the Anna Lindh Foundation was created, but today are more on the forefront than ever. Border closures, social restrictions, and limitations to mobility to prevent, of course, the spreading of the virus is having a huge impact on intercultural relations that, as we know, they have as a key element the direct interaction between people. And this is creating frustration on all the professionals in the field, so civil society, but also, and especially I would say, on young people that cannot be exposed to this direct exchange. Of course, we have seen also the sudden shift to the virtual space. It has already been so well discussed and analyzed by the other panelists, the potential, of course, of the virtual space that is allowing all of us to be connected when we cannot move. But we know this also that there are still there is a divide that is a different divide from the one we used to know, that relates, of course, to access, first of all, to the technology, and also to the skills, of course, that are required. So here we see in the digital sphere positive and negative aspects, because on the bright side of it, we could see, for example, we developed some trainings in intercultural competencies, and so people that maybe because also of visa restrictions or economic restrictions could have not benefited from mobility, from traveling to another country of the region, could take part in the same way as other colleagues in these opportunities that are offered. In relation to civil society, I think everything has been said. We also try to understand what is happening, talking every day with the heads of network, with the members of our networks, conducting surveys. So it was, let's say, obvious the difficulty civil society organizations had to plan within this uncertain time frame and circumstances. Also, there was a call for support in investing in digital literacy from our members. On the bright side, what we could see with the survey that we conducted with our networks in 2020, like last April, is that a majority of organizations actually kept the same level of work they had before, and some felt they were even more they had even more to do during the pandemic, more so for European-based organizations than Southern and Eastern Mediterranean, than organizations on the Southern and Eastern Mediterranean shore, and the majority, 2/3 of the work was mainly at the local and national level, with only 1/3 of work with a regional dimension. We could say that also on the positive sides, we have been observing is that the pandemic pushed people actually to come out of their comfort zone. And this could be a key for our dialogue work, because it could help people develop more empathy towards the others. That is one of the first attitudes we need in our work. And we have seen the emergence of solidarity initiatives, often led by groups that are more marginalized. A lot of solidarity initiatives by women, migrants, young people as well, and that they are receiving also more media attention. So there is a strong basis, let's say, to further develop our work institutionally and in collaboration and by civil society. What is emerging is this need, and Dimitrios, also you said, for a hybrid approach, that hybrid not only in relation to face-to-face and virtual exchanges, but also combining as much as we can the local dimension with the international dimension. Even this year, we have this challenge in seeing how to transform our activities as Anna Lindh Foundation, because in many of our countries, it is still possible to do things face-to-face at the local level. But then what is important for us is always to create this Euromed connection. So maybe virtual technologies can come in for creating this exchange of experiences and practices at the regional level. We are all testing. I mean, we are aware of that this year, next year will be also important years to test and to bring innovation. That is always something good, we believe, for our societies. I wanted just to share maybe one data that is coming from our research, and that is actually recognizing, I mean, people. We have the pulse, a bit of the feelings of populations across the region. And so we see that around 90% of people, of Euromed populations, so we can say, believe that the civil society can play and should play a crucial role for better living together in multicultural societies. Of course, in our circle, we are all saying that, but it is very important to have data that is also supporting what we all think and know from our direct experience. Populations are also calling for further investment in education, also as Alison was saying, in arts and culture that have suffered tremendously from this pandemic. From this pandemic, we never have to forget. So I just wanted to say that for the next phase of our work, we will focus on continuing our support, of course, for civil society, and on the one hand, of course, maintaining how can I say, work along the same objectives that we had before. But we will also try to support the civil society, especially to address some of the most pressing challenges for our societies that are the consequences of the pandemic, that are economic, cultural, social consequences. And also another huge challenge that we see is affecting the world and the Euromed region is the climate change and the environmental challenge. This for Euromed populations is really appearing as, I can say, the #1 area of common mutual interest. So we need also to be aware of this area of work. And finally, I would like to share an invitation and a piece of information that is to join the Anna Lindh Foundation Virtual Marathon for Dialogue. This is an initiative that will take place between May and June 2021. And it is the Foundation's contribution to the 25th anniversary of the Barcelona process, and an initiative fully originating under the leadership of Dr. Al-Sharif, and with the limitations, of course, posed by COVID-19. And this is an opportunity to bring together in the virtual space a large number, if not the majority of all the members of our civil society networks partners, to showcase, on the one hand, dialogue work, but also to work together on this common agenda for the promotion of a Mediterranean dialogue. So we can say that there would be a political document, a manifesto, where we would be calling actually for many of the important aspects that have been shared. So for sure, #1 word, I think also in light of our conversation today, it's equity, equality, and the key role of civil society at the decision-making table that should come out of this marathon for dialogue. I thank you very much. And we will have maybe opportunities to discuss this afternoon or later on, of course, on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleonora, for the issues that you raised. And, you know, I was just thinking very quickly, it's not only, I mean, the virtual space is not enough. We talked about the divide. Rowaida also talked about, you know, and Alison, right? Not everybody has access, skills. But beyond that, I mean, I see this as a Greek living in Turkey and living in an area. COVID-19 has corresponded with increased tensions, say, between Greece and Turkey. Right. And so interesting that those that are interested in communicating, Greeks and Turks, we can do this with the virtual space. But when borders are closed and the citizens of the two countries cannot interact, you create greater divide. And then you go to the xenophobia, the profiling, and everything else. And this has corresponded, you know, the closing of borders where wider populations cannot interact, either for reasons of tourism or business or exchanges or so on, creates a divide. And this is something that we need to consider. And also, I'm glad you bring it climate change, because if we follow, for example, I mean, Rowaida talked about the SDGs, absolutely, Sustainable Development Goals, which should be at the top of the agenda as well. Climate change, if we look at one of the last reports a couple of years ago of the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and it talked about the Mediterranean, and, you know, with the 1.5 degree rise in temperature, the first city that will suffer in our part of the world is Alexandria, where, according to that report, about 4 million people will become internally displaced people, those living by the shore, because that whole area is going to be flooded, right? So climate change is very real. And then for me as a Greek, Alexandria is not too far away, right? Or for me living in Turkey, Alexandria is not too far away. So climate change is really a priority that needs somehow to be included. Anyway, we are, maybe we'll go on for another 10 minutes, but we have a few questions which I will just read out, and then maybe all of them, and then give you the opportunity to sort of respond. The first one is from another difficult name to pronounce, Sijen Zana Matejic, who talks about, yes, she agrees that everything he said is true, and people involved in CSOs, CSO staff and personnel understand the issues, and because they live them, it seems, he says, her question is, how do we convince our governments that we deserve a place at the table? Exactly what everyone has been saying here. When we have been squeezed out of our resources by the pandemic and funds that have been cut, and civil society is on its knees. And let me go to the other ones also. And that's interesting too, because before I go to the other ones, another thing we talked about, hybrid work and funding. When I talk for my projects, for example, to different funders, I keep hearing now that they're going to start evaluating funding on the basis of this hybridity, where digitalization comes in. And this will have an impact on projects. We have to rethink totally our approach, right? Because it means for funders, oh, well, maybe I don't have to give them much money, or I can give more money to many more, but some projects that we consider relevant lose their impact, because obviously it's cheaper to do things online, right? And so, and you lose the person-to-person contact in a number of projects which are necessary. Then we have Stefanos Valianatos, the head of network from Greece, and of course, someone who has been crucial in this project and bringing all of you together, who asked what are the major challenges that ALF has to face as a result of COVID. I mean, some of it has been already answered, but in order to fulfill its mandate, and do you consider that ALF needs to adapt or change some of its policies, priorities, and functioning model to deal with them effectively? Also, he asks, in general, what should the role and approach of multilateral civil society institutions be, the collective approach to how to deal with the new environment at large? And can you identify institutions that are similar to ALF, and how can they develop a common front, right, to minimize overlapping and maximizing effects, given the challenges of fewer funding available resources? Abdullah Arslan asks, how would can youth be politically empowered? Is there a possibility to have a regional common approach, or the solution should be unique to each country? Can intercultural dialogue help political empowerment of youth? I'm glad Abdullah is asking this question. He's my student, and he's very much engaged and involved. And this is a very good question, something we try to deal with. And then Dr. Hadil Al-Maaitah, who I think is the sister of Rowaida, right? So I saw your comments. So she says that, he says, in Arab countries, including Jordan, it is common to question and doubt internationally funded CSOs. Of course, this is a big issue. Skeptics of international funding, international NGOs, real motives are at all levels and from different backgrounds. And these, and in particular during crisis time, this thing is more relevant as it's politically used and manipulated, absolutely. So when coming from opinion leaders, this makes it more difficult for workers and societies and civil society in terms of funding, and sometimes, tarnishes the credibility. So a number of questions, some of them are linked, some are not, but I would just give you all the floor to maybe respond as we are going to close this webinar. So Rowaida, you want to start with responding to some of them, all of them?
Yes.
However you want.
Yeah, I would like actually to respond to the first one, how to convene our governments to sit on the table. I think Joseph just said that, in the survey, one of the findings that around 90% of the CSOs have played a critical role in the national response to COVID-19. So the CSOs, they have to show the evidence. They have to come up and, show the government where are their strength. I think if they identify their strength, when they come to government, it's not like, we want you to give us. No, we want you to help. We want to help you. We want to find solution. again, I think, Alison said that, the governments, they cannot do everything. When you talk about, the mental health issue, no way that government, can cover everybody. I totally agree with you. So I think, the CSOs, they have to identify the gaps in services, the gaps of support, in their community from the government. And then, they can come up as, partners. And I said, partners, they have to come from, this point of view that, we need, we have this, expertise in this area, and it should be a gap actually, and a solution. And we want to help you. We have all the experiences, to do that. And I know it's not easy, but, as CSOs, we should not, and on the other hand, we should not, and on the other hand, we should not give up actually in what we need to do. It's very important that, whenever you bridge the trust, whenever, you show, your expertise and saying, I think, the government will click with you. I've been, as Minister of Social Development, I've been actually so happy when I get, one of the CSOs telling me that, in that, far area of that, village of that far area, or of that very sad, environment for women, we want to do 1, 2, 3. So, at that time, I was so happy, that someone will help me. So the approach is very important. That's why the communication skills is very important, how to communicate. The other thing also, they can do lobbying. It is not only the government, that they are working, in the country. They have to do lobbying with the parliament. They have to bring strong people to their CSOs. They have to have, maybe they can have advisory group for this special, civil society organization or something. They have to find, the many, means that can facilitate and pave their way to the government. They have to show that they have very high credibility, and they can function, they can deliver, and they can produce. And I'm sure, with this, especially after, the COVID-19 pandemic, I think things will be changed. The government, they need us. They need the CSO. But, we have to do that in a very clever way. And this is where Alison said also that we need entrepreneurs now. We need the CSOs to have, those entrepreneurs that, they can get, to the government and convince the government that, they can, be of great help for them. And like I said, when you go somewhere, don't say, what's matter, with you. Say what matters to you, even, for the government. Thank you. I think they can still do it. They should not give up. Thank you.
Thank you, Rowaida. Alison.
Yeah, I'm picking up on what Rowaida's just said there, actually. I think the problem is that the government always sees that the only sector that is able to do these things is the private sector. It's almost as if they know and understand what the CSOs and the NGOs can do, but they kind of treat it as something else. It's over there. It's a nice little thing that happens. And they don't give it the same credibility, despite the fact that they have picked up most of the work, especially during this period. So it's really important that collectively we come together as a sector, because the more people that come together as a sector to vocalise that, the more chance you've got of being heard by government. And I think the other thing for me is picking up on Abdullah's point about politically and empowering youth. I know here in the UK, lots of youth have switched off after the Brexit debate, and they felt very much let down by the political system. The majority, if you look at the voting statistics, for instance, majority of young people voted to stay in the EU. The majority of the older people voted to get out of the EU. That's very simplistic, I appreciate. But they felt they had no political agency and that none of the political parties spoke directly to them. So I think, how can we do it as CSOs? That's our job is to go out and to keep the conversation going, to keep having those conversations, and most importantly, using these 2 ears that we have to listen to young people. They're not problems, they have lots of the solutions, and they are the future. So giving them every opportunity to show what they can do and to listen with respect. Respect, as my dad used to say, is earned, not demanded. But too often we will like to tell our young people what to do instead of listening to what their ideas are about how they can build a better society, because they do have some amazing ideas and they're very entrepreneurial. They will find a way to make something happen. What we need to do is be facilitators of that. That's how we can support them to do it. And they will find their voice by going through that, I think. And use politics with a small p, because I think so many young people have been switched off by politics with the big P, and they're finding their own movements. So how do we encourage them to do that and continue to do it?
Thank you very much, Alison. Yeah, these are great ideas regarding youth, and I like the politics without P, with a small p. I always tell my students, you know, every public act is a political act. It doesn't have to be expressed through, you know, voting or government or being elected. Everything is political. So it's in ourselves to empower ourselves. And you're right, we have a lot to learn from our youth. Joseph.
Yes, thank you. From our experience, and I'm a firm believer, one thing that works always is to oblige the people to work together with a mix of profiles. We try to mix, not to debate, to do things, to do projects. Academia, CSOs, representatives, practitioners, policymakers. And this is, if you want, a very humble approach, because maybe the projects are not big enough. But at local level, at the level of the interaction that we get, we are able, as happens in many different cases in the Anna Lindh Foundation, to make a change. And I think this is relevant. We have to go out from our comfort zone. We are very happy to interact with people that thinks exactly the same as us. But it's very important and very productive to go further and to interact with other profiles. And in that way, and related, referring to this, how we could political empower the youngsters. I think we have to set a common basic principles in this regard, and then to go for adaptations at local level, applying a lot of flexibility and adapting to the age context. I think it's something that in the Anna Lindh Foundation we are very used to working in that way. General principles and application at local level with a lot of flexibility and adaptation. And related to the international funding, yeah, this is always a tricky aspect. Any single funding is tricky, but it's a question of assess and to negotiate the conditionality of these funds. This is crucial, because if you are receiving funds but you are not able to do what you think, do you believe that you have to do, is useless, absolutely. So in this regard, the negotiation and the previous conditions before getting funds is crucial. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Eleonora.
Most of so many ideas have been shared. I would like to say that with the dialogue work, like with intercultural dialogue, we need this long-term approach. We know that to make change, to change behaviors, attitudes, we need the continuity. In this regard, and answering to one of the questions, we will continue working along the lines that have been identified also some years ago and within our strategy towards 2025. But I believe that there are emerging priorities and also ways of working. As I said before, the importance of working on climate change, but also the importance of showing, and this is linked also to what my other colleagues said, to show the relevance of civil society for the recovery after the pandemic. A recovery that is not only economic recovery, but there again, civil society should show in which way they can also generate prosperity, income for societies, recovery that is also cultural and social recovery, and so much has to be done. So I believe these will be new strands on which we will be focusing with our funding, but also with our strategic and political discourse, because it is so important also with what Alison was saying to present the sector and to speak with in a simple way with the clear messaging that has to be coordinated and effective. We are living in a world also of communication. Also Rowaida said it's about the way also civil society communicates. So in our role as Anna Lindh Foundation, we will work very much on showing this relevance and the relevance of dialogue work that is not an elitist topic or a luxury, but we will, I think, focus on showing how essential it is for sustainable development in all its aspects. And just to give a small example also of this coordinated approach with like-minded organizations and not to duplicate work, being aware of the scarcity of means and resources. In this moment, I wanted to refer to the work that we are initiating, and I'm very happy about that, on intercultural cities. So to engage municipalities, and let's say that the flagship of this investment of supporting work at the local level and the municipalities and civil society is the establishment of what we want to be the EleonoraInsalaco, the Capital for Dialogue Award. So this is a scheme to recognize work done for dialogue and proposals for dialogue work and for a systemic approach at the local level. But what I want to share is that we are building this program together with many other organizations. Like we had around the table last week, Council of Europe that has an important program on intercultural cities. We had the UN Habitat, we have a UNESCO that also have several networks of cities. We had the UCGL, EuroCities, MedCities, so many actors, and there what we are trying to see is what each could contribute, for example, to the winning city, so that we are going together towards a similar objective and around, of course, the mission of the Anna Lindh Foundation, because each international institution has a specific mandate. So as Anna Lindh Foundation, we are always trying to focus on our specific mandate, that is the promotion of intercultural dialogue and working with other organizations, international and of course national and NGOs. So these are my last reflections. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Eleonora, and thank you very much to all of you for this very enriching discussion and debate. I think I've actually taken more notes in this panel than the previous two, even though the previous two were very rich in information as well, because I think a lot of other things were discussed as well. And we'll keep you posted of our work. As I said, this webinar will be online soon, and we are writing a report, and then we're moving to a new series of webinars that are actually going to be more dedicated. So obviously youth, gender are going to be dedicated sessions, among other things as well. And as I said, we'll also wait for the results of the survey, because these are going to be over the next 2.5, 3 months, to see how we can incorporate some of the themes in these other webinars, where we'll be working together with our partners into more targeted discussions. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure to meet you all and to talk with you. And I look forward to doing this again in the future soon with you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you very much, Dimitrios.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.